There appears to be no let-up in the battle for control of Ukraine's eastern industrial heartland, the Donbas, but the civilian toll is rising. The regional governor says at least 4 civilians were killed in an airstrike in the eastern Ukrainian city of Lysychansk as they sheltered at a cultural center. It's the latest city under Ukrainian control in the region after Russia seized almost full control of neighboring Sievierodonetsk. With the Russian campaign intensifying in Lysychansk now, people face a difficult question of whether to leave or stay.
It's a gruesome task. Rescue workers look for survivors under the rubble at this cultural center in Lysychansk. They come across some of the victims. The building sheltering dozens of people was destroyed in what the Luhansk regional governor says was a Russian airstrike. Eyewitnesses describe what happened after the attack.
I heard someone cry, terrible cries. I ran here and saw only ruins and bodies. They were carried away on stretchers. I don't know. Some were alive, some were dead.
Lysychansk is just across the river from Sievierodonetsk, the key battleground in Russia's latest offensive in the Donbas region. Unlike its northern neighbor, the city is still under Ukrainian control. But constant Russian shelling and rocket attacks mean the civilians here are in grave danger. Authorities are trying to convince them to leave, but some refuse.
We are old people. We do not have a place to go. Where will I go? I'm 72. They will dump me in some village somewhere. Guys, fight for peace. Let the peace come.
Many, though, decided to leave. It's believed less than a fifth of the pre-war population of nearly 100,000 people still remains in Lysychansk. For many of them, destroyed houses mean they can only seek shelter in basements like this one.
I don't know how to put it into words. People are afraid. This is war. It's scary. There's no communication. You can't go out anywhere. There's no place to go.
With nowhere to go and no end to the fighting inside, these people are praying their lives, shattered by the brutal conflict, will be spared.
Let's get an update now from our correspondent, Roman Goncharenko. He joins us from Ukraine's capital, Kiev. Roman, what's the latest on the fighting in Ukraine?
Well, there is not much new. The fighting continues all along the front line, which is more than 1,000 kilometers long. The most severe fighting is around the city of Sievierodonetsk, and we have reports that the Russians are attacking from 9 directions. There are still civilians at that chemical plant, Azot. We have new figures. The Ukrainians say that there are some 568 civilians there and 38 children. Most of them are workers of that plant and their families, and they've been staying there for a while. The attempts to save them, to get them out, failed yesterday, and we expect more attempts today or in the coming days. Russian rockets also hit the Ukrainian city of Mykolaiv, which is in the south at the Black Sea. And there are new reports from the Ukrainian armed forces that they claim to have hit a Russian tugboat near the island, the Snake Island, which is a strategically important island in the Black Sea, just south of Odessa. And Ukrainian forces say they hit that tugboat, which was carrying Russian troops.
Now, yesterday we saw some high-profile diplomacy in Kiev. The leaders of Germany, France, Italy and Romania traveled there for face-to-face talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The visiting leaders said they back Ukraine's bid to become an EU membership candidate, and they expressed their outrage at the devastation wrought by Russian forces in Ukraine. Let's take a look.
In the ruins of Kiev's suburb Irpin, Europe's leaders saw for themselves the devastation of the war. The heads of France, Germany and Italy met with Romania's president to tour the suburb where heavy fighting and alleged war crimes saw many civilians killed. Their first visit to Ukraine since Russia invaded was a chance to show Europe's support and counter criticism over the speed and scale of their responses.
Europe is by your side. It will remain so for as long as necessary, until victory is achieved, in the form of a return to peace in a free and independent Ukraine. The opposite of the consequences of the barbarism that we have seen together this morning in Irpin.
In a joint press conference in Kyiv, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called for more heavy weaponry, positioning his country as Europe's eastern flank.
Russia does not choose whom and when to threaten, whom in Europe to grant safety. Russian aggression against Ukraine is aggression against all of Europe, against a united Europe, against every one of us, against our values. Our response must be united.
The European leaders pledged more military aid and backed immediate candidate status for Ukraine joining the European Union.
Ukraine belongs within the European family, and a milestone on its journey toward the EU will be to receive candidate status.
The EU is set to discuss Ukraine's candidacy on Friday, but even if all member states agree, it could still take years for Kyiv to gain actual membership.
So, Roman, a show of solidarity there for Ukraine by the leaders of the 4 EU countries. Was that as much as Volodymyr Zelensky could hope for, or was he expecting more?
Well, Zelensky himself said he was satisfied. I think he was pretty happy with that support for the Ukrainian EU bid. Maybe he was a bit disappointed that there were no or very few new commitments to supply Ukraine with arms, with heavy arms, with artillery in the first place. And I think he might have been disappointed that there were no specific commitments as to the sanctions, new sanctions against Russia, especially no new sanctions, no embargo on Russian gas, which would hit Russia really hard. And this is something that Ukraine is hoping for. But in general, I think Ukraine is rather satisfied with the results of that visit, yes.
If Ukraine does formally become an EU candidate country, Roman, would that change anything in the effort to end the Russian invasion?
Well, this will not change anything immediately on the battlefield, but we shouldn't underestimate. It's an extremely important sign of political support for Ukraine. It's a moral booster for the Ukrainian society, which has been hoping for that chance to become an EU member for many decades, for 2 decades actually. And it's a historic event, and we've heard those words, historic, yesterday during the press conference several times. But practically speaking, this will give Ukraine more money from the European Union to conduct reforms, to strengthen democracy. And it will give also new expertise to Ukraine, will give the European Union a possibility to send more experts to Ukraine to help it become a member of the European Union one day.
Roman, thank you very much. That was DW's Roman Goncharenko in Kiev. So, today, the European Commission will issue its recommendation on Ukraine's application for EU membership. But the final decision on that status rests with the leaders of the EU member states themselves, who meet for a council summit next week. The Commission is expected to recommend candidacy status for Ukraine and neighboring Moldova. But there's a host of other states who've been waiting for years to join the EU, here in dark blue, notably Turkey and countries in the Western Balkans. Well, for more, let's cross over to our Brussels bureau chief, Alexandra Pranam. And Alexandra, tell us more about the recommendation that the Commission is expected to issue today.
Well, indeed, Terry, we expect the European Commission to recommend that Ukraine, and by the way, Moldova as well, be granted candidate status. However, it will be interesting to see how they are going to express this opinion, because we know that the decision about that was postponed a couple of times because, of course, it's not an easy decision, and some officials are saying that it's Ukraine has a lot to do. Still, they have to fight corruption. They have to do more to improve the rule of law situation in the country. And nevertheless, we expect the European Commission to make this recommendation today, especially, of course, now after France, Italy, and Germany threw their weight behind this idea. However, when it happens today, it could be that the decision will be connected with conditions, and of course it will be only the beginning of a very long process. Let's have a look at our explainer.
Ukraine may be on its way into the European Union, and some leaders have promised it won't take long.
It will be not as usual a matter of years to form this opinion, but I think a matter of weeks if we work closely together. So for you, dear Volodymyr.
Thank you so much. But despite the public show of solidarity the EU Commission President displayed here on her first visit to Ukraine, there are a few legal challenges ahead. Candidacy is the first step. Countries have to fulfill the so-called Copenhagen criteria, which includes having a stable, democratic government that applies the rule of law. The second stage are accession talks, which mark the beginning of practical preparations for EU membership. So a country would usually need to undergo a reform process, which includes its judiciary, the administration, its economy, and political structures. The rules add up to 35 chapters in total, with long lists of conditions. Countries are vetted accordingly by the Commission on the state of their markets, agriculture, external relations, and other factors. If EU negotiators find a problem, like government meddling in the appointment of judges, they can demand justice reforms, which can take years. Finland needed 3 years to comply. Turkey started the negotiating phase back in 2005, but talks have long been deadlocked due to Ankara's increasingly authoritarian tendencies and the leadership's unwillingness to reform. And in the case of Ukraine, the French president seems to have low expectations. We all know perfectly well that the process allowing them to join will take several years. In truth, probably several decades.
En vérité, sans doute plusieurs décennies.
Once all 35 chapters of requirements are satisfied and all member states have signed off on them, together with the European Commission and the European Parliament, an accession treaty is put forward. It is then signed and ratified, and voila, you are a EU member state. In the mid-2000s, 12 mostly Eastern European countries were allowed to join the bloc, despite apparent issues with dysfunctional institutions and deep-seated corruption. The understanding was that for former communist countries, change was more difficult to bring about. A political decision was made. Ukraine today has institutional issues as well. On top of that, it will need massive reconstruction efforts after the war. And it seems that at the moment, not everyone in the EU is motivated to take them in.
So the path to EU membership can be long and difficult, and some members do oppose membership for Ukraine, some of the EU member states now. Alexandra, tell us more about that.
Yeah, we're talking here about states such as Portugal, for instance, or Denmark, or the Netherlands. They are saying that it's not the right thing to grant Ukraine candidate status because the country is at war. Any accession talks could only begin after the war is over. They are also saying that it would be not fair for Ukraine to jump the queue when we consider that there are other states, such as Montenegro, North Macedonia, for instance, who have been in the waiting room for years, even though they are official candidate states. And there are also voices saying that the European Union itself is not ready to welcome new members because before that they need to reform the bloc. So as you see, there are some member states who are very skeptical, and of course, to grant Ukraine in EU candidate status, we would need all the member states, the EU would need all the member states to be on board.
Alexandra, thank you very much as always. Our Brussels Bureau Chief, Alexandra van Namen.